Russia dismisses scandalous Trump allegations as pulp fiction. A document suggesting Kremlin intelligence chiefs have evidence of political misconduct and embarrassing personal behaviour is rejected by the president-elect as fake news. That as Obama bids farewell with a call to arms in defence of hope and democracy.
If you're disappointed by your elected officials, grab a clipboard, get some signatures, and run for office yourself.
Also this lunchtime, the PM comes under pressure on the crisis in NHS England, but admits there are problems.
I accept there have been a small number of incidents where unacceptable practices have taken place.
A 15-year-old girl is remanded in secure accommodation, charged with the murder in York of a 7-year-old girl. And brace yourselves, winter may be about to remind you of just what it can do.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Alistair Stewart.
Good afternoon. An orderly transition doesn't get close to it. With just days to go until Donald Trump enters the White House, he's mired by unsubstantiated allegations the Russians have evidence of political corruption and bizarre personal behaviour on his part. He denies it, and so do the Russians. Meanwhile, Barack Obama offered his farewell to the presidency with a call to Americans to defend their democracy, which is threatened, he said, whenever it is taken for granted. More on the Obama legacy in a moment, and our correspondent Robert Moore live in New York. First, Juliet Bremner on the Trump allegations.
Claims and counterclaims of Russia's alleged attempts to undermine the American elections have swirled around Donald Trump. Today, a lurid, unverified memo emerged detailing compromising personal information. His response typically blunt: fake news, a total political witch hunt. Later, he added, Russia just said the unverified report, paid for by political opponents, is a complete and total fabrication. Utter nonsense, very unfair. In reality, no one knows what, if any, of this memo is true. It includes allegations of the president-elect's use of prostitutes and other sexual acts. Rumours have circulated in Washington for months, but are dismissed by Trump's inner circle.
Nobody has sourced it. They're all unnamed, unspoken sources in the story, and it says it was based on a Russian investigator to begin with. So where are we?
I think it was based on an MI6 British investigator.
The information is understood to have been gathered by a former British intelligence officer thought to have worked for MI6 and later hired by Trump's opponents for the election campaign. The details were considered so explosive that the president and president-elect were both briefed by intelligence chiefs.
My expectation and my hope is that this work will continue after I leave, that Congress, in possession of both the classified and unclassified reports, that the president-elect and his administration, in possession of the classified and unclassified reports, will take it seriously and now get to work.
Donald Trump has raised eyebrows by publicly disputing claims from his own intelligence agencies of Russian hacking. He has visited Moscow, this was him in 2013, dealing with the Miss Universe competition, but he utterly rejects being lured into any compromising behaviour. 9 days before his inauguration, hopes of fostering better relations with the Putin regime look increasingly difficult. Juliet Bremner, ITV News.
And our correspondent Robert Moore is live in New York, where Donald Trump will give that press conference later this afternoon. Robert, what are you expecting to hear from Mr. Trump?
Well, look, Alistair, it's 167 days or so since Donald Trump has actually held a press conference. So as you can imagine, there are an avalanche of questions heading his way here at Trump Tower shortly. Of course, everyone wants to know basically the priorities for him as president. This press conference was originally intended to try and explain how he might disentangle his business affairs so there wouldn't be a massive conflicts of interest. But now, of course, with these new allegations, the absolute focus will be on his relationship with Russia. I think there are going to be two crucial questions here. First of all, did he conduct himself personally while he was in Moscow and St. Petersburg in a way that has profoundly compromised him with the Russian intelligence services? In other words, is he ripe for blackmail? And secondly, did either he or his advisors have a covert political relationship with Moscow, with Russian officials, in which very sensitive political information was traded? So those are obviously explosive allegations. He needs to try and tackle those in very substantive and convincing ways.
Have you ever known an atmosphere quite as febrile as this?
I think febrile is a pretty good word. A febrile, chaotic, almost sort of disbelieving. I mean, we're only a few days now away from Donald Trump's inauguration. We have an outgoing president talking about the risks to, implicitly, the risks to American democracy. We have an incoming president who has a very strained relationship, clearly, with his future intelligence agencies, the CIA and the FBI, as well as with the press. So there are many people here who are already aggrieved because they have a sense that he didn't win legitimately, because he lost the popular vote. And now there are these added questions about his relationship with Russia and whether he is vulnerable to being blackmailed. So look, it is in many ways a political crisis of sorts, several days before he even is sworn in.
Robert, thank you. Well, those allegations over the next president provided an intriguing backdrop to the current one's farewell speech. Last night, Barack Obama, in Chicago, where his career began, warned an enthusiastic crowd of supporters democracy can buckle when we give in to fear, and he urged them never to take it for granted. He claimed success on the economy, race relations and healthcare, and shared it all in a moving thank you with his wife, Michelle. Our correspondent Martin Geisler was in Chicago to watch Mr. Obama say goodbye.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the 44th President of the United States, Barack Obama.
For his final farewell, Barack Obama went back to where it all began. He loves Chicago, and his adopted hometown loves him back. 4 more years, the crowd chanted in vain.
I can't do that.
His time in office, he said, hadn't been easy, but he looks back now with pride.
If I had told you 8 years ago that America would reverse a Great Recession, reboot our auto industry, shut down Iran's nuclear weapons program without firing a shot, take out the mastermind of 9/11, you might have said our sights were set a little too high.
He barely mentioned Donald Trump by name, but he did call on people to step up if the going gets tough.
If you're disappointed by your elected officials, grab a clipboard, get some signatures, and run for office yourself.
It hadn't been an emotional speech, but then the president turned his attention to the woman who made this journey with him.
You took on a role you didn't ask for, and you made it your own, with grace and with grit and with style and good humor.
The first family joined the president on stage, and together they bid the country goodbye.
You can feel the adoration for President Obama in this room. He is always impressive at events like this. But America must now prepare to bid farewell to Obama, the orator, and prepare to welcome a new president whose method of communication and whose message could not be more different.
Whatever comes next, Obama's supporters insist his legacy will live on.
Do you feel better about the future after hearing him tonight?
Yes, I do, because I know that it does not matter who's in that office. What matters is that we love each other as a people, and we remain united as one.
I'm elated and a little depressed, because I don't think we'll see anyone like this in our lifetimes again.
Barack Obama came into power preaching a mantra of hope. 8 years on, as he leaves office, the message remains the same. Martin Geisler, ITV News, Chicago.
Here, the Prime Minister dismissed talk from the Red Cross of a humanitarian crisis in NHS England as irresponsible. But under pressure from Labour's Jeremy Corbyn, she admitted there had been a small number of incidents of unacceptable practice. That as leading doctors warned the pressures on the service were putting lives at risk, and nurses leaders said that they had never seen a crisis like it. Our political correspondent Libby Vina reports.
Humanitarian crisis. Underfunded, underdoctored and overstretched, struggling or failing to cope. How some are describing the NHS this winter. Add to that reports of a serious falling out between number 10 and the head of NHS England, Simon Stevens, and it's fast becoming a major test of Theresa May's leadership.
Prime Minister, are you going to put more money into the NHS? How are you getting on with Simon Stevens? Is he too political?
In the Commons, the questions continued. Labour's Jeremy Corbyn asked her about a toddler treated on plastic chairs because there was no hospital bed.
Does the Prime Minister and the Health Secretary think this is an acceptable way of treating a 22-month-old child needing help?
Shameful. I accept there have been a small number of incidents where where unacceptable practices have taken place.
Small number, Labour MPs shouted back, and their leader went on to mock Mrs May's big new idea.
Earlier this week, the Prime Minister said she wanted to create a shared society. Well, we've certainly got that. More people sharing hospital corridors on trolleys. More people sharing waiting areas at A&E departments. More people sharing in anxiety created by this government. Our NHS, Mr Speaker, is in crisis, but the Prime Minister is in denial.
Earlier, the Royal College of Physicians had warned people's lives are being put at risk or on hold, affecting families across the country. It is essential that we match the demand on health services with the resources to meet it.
Is there going to be more money for the NHS, Mr Hunt?
The Health Secretary is expected to answer questions on the issue later, but neither he nor the Prime Minister seem ready to commit to spending more money.
Libby, you've just shown us the Prime Minister getting a pretty rough ride and giving a little ground, but how much further do you think Theresa May might go?
Well, I don't think she gave an awful lot of ground today. She did dismiss those comments from the Red Cross, talking about there being a humanitarian crisis, saying they were overblown and irresponsible. But questioned by Jeremy Corbyn about that incident involving a toddler propped up on two plastic chairs because there wasn't a bed, she did look very embarrassed by that and conceded that there had been a small number of incidents of unacceptable practice. She seemed to be trying to make the argument that more and more people are coming to hospital, and although more are actually being treated within that 4-hour waiting time that's designated by the Department of Health, the fact is that so many are coming that as a percentage the numbers being seen within 4 hours is going down. Now the problem with that is, you might ask, is why hasn't the government foreseen the extra numbers? And if there are so many extra people coming to A&E, why isn't the government actually putting more resources in to help cope with the problem?
Libby, thank you. And we asked you to share your experiences of the NHS on our Facebook page. Thanks for that. To read them and indeed to have your say, just go to facebook.com/ITV News. A 15-year-old girl has appeared in court charged with the murder of a 7-year-old girl in York. The teenager was arrested after Katie Ruff was found seriously injured in an alleyway on Monday. Neil Connery is outside York Magistrates for us. Neil, what exactly happened in court?
Well, a brief hearing here this morning. A 15-year-old girl who can't be named for legal reasons, as you say, charged with the murder of Katie Ruff and also with possession of an offensive weapon. The girl, who was flanked by 2 security guards and a youth offending team manager, said nothing during the 8-minute hearing. She was remanded into secure accommodation and will now appear at Leeds Crown Court on Friday. Also here this morning were Katie Ruff's grandparents and other family members to hear these proceedings take place. Katie Ruff, as we know, was found seriously injured on Monday on a path leading to a playing field in the Woodthorpe area of York. Officers arrived, she was taken to hospital but died shortly later. Now, tributes have been paid to her, led by her father, who said the family were devastated by what had happened, and also Katie's head teacher, who described her death as a terrible loss.
Neil, thank you. Still to come, high winds close the Forth Bridge in Edinburgh as Britain prepares for a burst of wintry weather. And the grandmother who couldn't stop in retirement and set up a business, now making millions. But first, there's been a big rise in the number of children needing to have rotten teeth removed. Data gathered by the Local Government Association suggested that, on average, 160 operations were carried out on people under 18 every week, and that's up more than 10% in just 2 years. Richard Pallow has the details.
These teeth are rotten. They belong to a 5-year-old. Unhealthy, unsightly, but far from unusual. Tooth decay in children is at record levels.
You need to go a little bit better on the back teeth, okay?
And sugar consumption so prevalent that dentists are seeing it emerge at a younger age than ever.
I had a patient today, 2 years old, with decays, which is definitely not right. And lots of times, actually, I find out when they drink fizzy drinks.
More than 40,000 children are having their decayed teeth removed in hospital every year. That amounts to around 161 operations per day, costing the NHS more than £35 million annually. Such operations are traumatic and often completely avoidable.
Government can force manufacturers to make sure that labelling is clearer. Parents can take responsibility around oral health and making sure that their children go and see the dentist regularly.
The main problem is prolonged exposure to sugar, sipping fruit drinks all day, for example. The government's sugar tax may go some way to cutting consumption, putting prices up, even getting the approval from some children.
I'd say it's a good thing because then children wouldn't get like toothache and stuff that hurts.
Well, yeah, because it is unhealthy and you can get fat by it.
Dentists claim that while many children and parents do heed the messages, the extractions are emblematic of the government's disinterest in oral health, and that prevention, not surgery, does remain the answer. Richard Pallow, ITV News.
Now, after a particularly mild Christmas and New Year, it seems winter may be catching up with us. High winds are sweeping across much of Scotland and the north of England this lunchtime, and there are warnings that snow showers are on the way. Well, these were the scenes in Blaydon-upon-Tyne near Gateshead earlier today. High winds blew a trampoline into a pub and shifted an entire horse stable into the middle of the road. Meanwhile, in Edinburgh, the Forth Bridge has been closed after a lorry overturned. Well, David Cowan is live there for us. David, what's the latest?
Well, the consensus here is that the driver involved in this incident has had a very lucky escape indeed. The bridge was closed to high-sided vehicles at midnight this morning, but he chose to cross at 2 o'clock. He was almost off the bridge, heading towards Fife, when his 44-tonne truck was hit by a gust of wind reaching 74 miles per hour, and it blew his truck from the northbound carriageway across the central reservation of the bridge into the southbound carriageway. Now, he got away with just a few cuts. He was taken off the bridge by the police and charged subsequently with dangerous driving. The bridge is used by 150,000 vehicles every day. It's closed in both directions at the moment. Teams of engineers are out there. They're hoping to get the truck back on its wheels and at the very least open the bridge to 2 lanes in time for the rush hour tonight. But as always, guess what? Everything depends on the weather.
Indeed so. David, thank you. The Prime Minister's spoken to the Irish Taoiseach about the political uncertainty in Northern Ireland. Follows the resignation at Stormont of Deputy Leader Martin McGuinness on Monday. Theresa May was also asked in the Commons whether it would delay Britain's exit from the EU. She said that the country would still have a say in negotiations. Petrol prices have risen to their highest level in more than 2 years, new figures suggest. A litre of petrol reached an average of £1.18 on Monday, according to data released by the government. That is the highest since December 2014. Supermarket giant Sainsbury's has reported record sales of more than £1 billion over the festive period. The 0.1% rise during the third quarter of the financial year was ahead of analysts' expectations of a 0.8% fall in sales. And scientists have identified a new species of gibbon living in the tropical forests of southwest China. The rare animal, which has been observed by British researchers, has been named the Skywalker hooklock gibbon by scientific discoverers, who of course are fans of Star Wars. And finally, many think of retirement as an opportunity to sit back and put your feet up after years in the working world. Not Tricia Cudston. 3 years ago, the 69-year-old took a chance investing her own money into an idea to create makeup for older people. Now business is booming, big time. Suzanne Verdi has been speaking to her.
She's gone from full-time granny to millionaire businesswoman in just 3 years. From sitting on her sofa to sitting on a board, her business is now worth around £2 million.
I was 65 years old and I was sitting at home and I just thought, you know what, I might live for another 30 years. I can't possibly spend the next 30 years sitting on my sofa. I've always loved business and I've always loved makeup, and I kind of put the two together. I saw the possibility that there might be a lot of older women like me who were quite frustrated that they couldn't find the kind of products that worked well on their face now it's older. And I just thought the formulations need to be different.
Marketing has been the key, and the grandmother of 5 has embraced social media.
To start with, I'm going to use Look Fabulous Forever Eye Primer.
Her online makeup tips have been watched by around 3 million women. And although she sells beauty products, she's scathing about the beauty industry.
They've had this very strong message over a number of years, which is anti-aging. And the thing about being 65 is that that boat has sailed. You know, there's no point putting any anti-aging cream on, it's not going to work.
Now 69, Tricia has no intention of slowing down. In fact, she's working on a new product line and writing a book. Her message is, don't see age as a barrier to anything. Suzanne Verdi, ITV News.
And that is it. Mary Nightingale will be here at 6:30. The News Where You Are follows the national weather. But for now, from all of us, a very good afternoon to you. Bye-bye.